So this is a 1982 Imperial. It's a Frank Sinatra edition. The signification is down here on the side of the car, plus inside there's a reproduction of his signature. Lee Iacocca, who was the head of Chrysler back in the late 70s and early 80s, was good friends with Frank Sinatra. They had these cars for 81 and 82 with a total production between the 2 years of 279. Underneath the Imperial badging down here, it says electronic fuel injection, and these cars, it was in the infancy of fuel injection and had issues, and so Chrysler had the dealers convert them to carburation, and this is one of those cars. So it's got the door sticker that shows the mileage on the car when it was converted. So it's an all original car. It's not been painted. We're in St. Louis today, and this car was originally a St. Louis car, and I bought it about 3 years ago. All the accessories that came with the Sinatra edition are with this car. This is the cassette carrying case, so you could take your Sinatra tapes in the house. There's the center console that has the Frank Sinatra signature in it, so you could stow the tapes away. The tape deck does work, and there's a great Imperial network across the country, and one of our Imperial owners in New Jersey actually showed me how, via the internet, to fix the cassette deck. I bought this car in 2019 from the original family that bought it new in 1982 here at Goddard Chrysler dealer in the St. Louis market, and it still has the Goddard insignia on the back of the car. This car was immaculate. It only needed new tires. I drove it from St. Louis to home, which is a little over 100 miles. It's just a really nice riding and driving car, and it gets, about 24 miles to the gallon. It gets twice the mileage almost as the rest of these cars here today. This car, I always kind of wanted one. This car is the same year as the year that I graduated from high school. I first saw this car, and then about 4 months later, I did end up buying the car from the original owner. This car is one of 279. It's a survivor car, meaning that it is original. It's never been painted. Nothing has been restored on the car. It's just had regular maintenance items. I'm sure there are quite a few others similar to this car out in the country, but it's the only one here today. So this is a 1975 Imperial. This is what started my obsession with Imperials. This car belonged to our family doctor. He brought me into the world as well as my wife. So it's unusual, I think, to have a car that the doctor who delivered you, this is his car. I bought it from him when I was in college, and this was my very first Imperial, so I've had this car since 1985. This car is a survivor car as well. Unique things to a 75 Imperial is it came standard with four-wheel disc brakes, which is, the standard today, but almost 50 years ago it was not. This car has automatic leveling. It has automatic lights on and off. It has automatic dimming. It has climate control. The seats in this car are like a couch. And this is truly a highway cruiser. As I mentioned with the other car that we looked at, the 82, this car gets half the fuel mileage. On a good day, it'll get 12 on the road and 5 to 8 in town. But it does run well, and it rides well, and this is just a nice surviving example of this particular year. It's just a nice car, and I really enjoy driving this car. Sometimes when you're driving some of the others and then you get in this one, you're like, wow, this car is just really comfortable. So this car has had maintenance over the years. Just the other day, it had a new steering gear so that it would not leak power steering fluid. It's had all kinds of repairs to the power windows over the years, the braking system, the load leveling, as I mentioned, the shocks had to be replaced. So as anything but ages, it's been replaced on the car, so everything functions as it should, as new from 1975. This car is my very first Imperial, and I still have it after all these years, longer than my wife.
I brought my grandfather's 1970 Imperial LeBaron. He traded in a 68 Crown Imperial for this car in 1971, and it's been a family-owned car since then. The car itself was my grandfather's Sunday drive car. Unfortunately, he passed in 1976, and it sat in my grandmother's garage, who herself was never driven the car, never owned a license. So when I was younger, I would play in the car when we go over there to visit. So the car actually sat in her garage until she passed in 2007, and then I got the car back to our house. What I like about our car is the uniqueness of the fact that it's It's been in our family for 52 years now. It is all original. Original paint, original leather interior, original vinyl roof top. It's a good conversation piece when people come see it at a car show, because you don't see Imperials typically at a car show, let alone full-size C-body luxury cars. The Imperial nameplate was meant really to compete against a Lincoln and a Cadillac. And so what I really love about the Imperials is the comfort. You can cruise down the expressway at 80 miles an hour and feel like you're just floating on air. Our good friends Robert and Laquita outside of in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, they would have a Imperial Chrysler meet, and so that was our first gathering down there in 2010. Starting in 1969, Chrysler came out what they call the fuselage era car, and what the fuselage era cars were a little bit more curved body panels, lower profiles, to kind of give you a view of what an airplane will look like. So it first started out in '69 and ran into 1973, and so this is a second year showing of what that styling, body styling came out to.
This is a 1969 Imperial LeBaron two-door hardtop. One of 4,500 odd made in that year. So this is the first year of the fuselage styling for Chrysler as far as the Imperial goes. This car is twilight blue and has a blue leather bucket seat interior. It's a survivor car, all original drivetrain and everything. My grandfather had a similar car that was a four-door in this very color. So I had been looking for one for many, many years, and this is a car that there weren't that many survivors. This is probably not as tough of a car as the earlier Imperials. I think it's a very beautifully styled car. Just really has appealed to me for many years. My grandfather sort of started that. He bought a '64 Imperial LeBaron back in '64, and I just sort of, and he had the '69 as well. So those are the cars that I'm interested in. Chrysler was headed more toward homogenizing things, and so this shares a number of body panels with a regular Chrysler C-body car. The difference is the length of the front stub frame, which is 3 inches longer on the Imperial, but back behind the A-pillar you'll see it's virtually the same as any Chrysler two-door hardtop of the era. I think the styling of the front end, the U-shaped wraparound bumper, I think is very handsome.
It's a 1968 Imperial LeBaron. And the LeBaron at this time was the top of the line Imperial. I purchased the car in 1998, so I've had it quite a while. Purchased it from the original owner, gentleman that lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was probably 97 at the time that I purchased the car from him. Fine Italian gentleman, spoke with a very heavy accent, but he was obviously very proud to have been able to purchase a car like this. The vinyl top's original, interior's all original, unrestored. The chrome's all original. Car really drives and handles great. It only had 40,000 miles on it when I purchased it from the original owner. So it was a low mileage car. And for a long time, I didn't want to drive it because of that low mileage, but I decided in recent years that was silly. Who am I saving it for? So I drive it now. My first car was a 1964 Imperial, and that just got me hooked. And I've been an Imperial fan ever since. This car, it's kind of funny how I wound up actually acquiring the car. I apparently had left a note on the car, saw it in a parking lot somewhere, and simply said, hey, if you ever want to sell this car, give me a call. Well, 18 years later, he gave me a call. I couldn't believe he had held on to the piece of paper for 18 years, but he did. So I went down and looked at the car. I didn't remember anything about it, not after 18 years, but I knew after I saw it and drove it that I wanted to buy it. They only made about 1,400 of these, so they were fairly low production. It was an expensive car at the time, well equipped. Power windows, power vent windows, power seats, power steering, automatic, dual air conditioning, but it's an enjoyable car.
This is a 1968 Imperial Crown, purchased new, by a lady in Salem, Oregon, which is near Portland, I think. And then she sold it to a guy in Bremerton, and I found it on eBay and had it shipped to Michigan. The color code is called Navajo Beige. I like the off-color kind of beige. It's kind of a neutral color. It's not flashy. I take cars to the local cruise-in every Tuesday night, so it probably made it to Olympic Broil on a Tuesday night at some point. I'm not much into car shows. I mean, of all the cars I own, this one, I guess, we took it to Eyes on Design a couple years ago, so that was probably the biggest car show event I've done. Well, when I got the car, it was in pretty nice shape. We had the engine rebuilt. It's been repainted. The front seat's been reupholstered. And we've done a fair amount of mechanical work to it. Upgraded the air conditioning to a modern system so it blows out nice cold air. But all of the Imperials are kind of unique in their own way. 67 and 68 were a two model style. They're kind of unique in the middle of all that. And to me, it wasn't really necessarily a matter of choosing among Imperials. If I was going to own an Imperial, it was going to be a 68. I love the full width taillights. That was something that first showed up on Imperials in 67. It was a kind of radical change for Imperial. I love the way they look, across the back of the car. I think they're gorgeous. I think it's the first time this Imperial, in my ownership at least, has ever been, we had one other Imperial at Eyes on Design, Adam Wadecki's car, which is, I think it's a 72 that was owned by Sid Mead. This is the most Imperials I've seen together at once. This is kind of cool. My mother, we would go down to visit her parents in Charlotte, and that was always a very special time growing up. And my grandmother had a 68 Imperial. So I wanted that car pretty badly. When my grandfather sold it, I was kind of crushed and decided that maybe someday I'd have one, and so that's why we have this.
This is a 1964 Imperial Crown convertible, one of 922. It originally came out of South Carolina. It's a restored car, all to original specification. It's a very robustly built car. This is back when Imperial was all Imperial. This car shares very little with the rest of the Chrysler line. Body-wise, nothing. The cars were all about style back in the 60s. It's really not a matter of function. The way the windshield works on these cars, where it's curved here, so like on the 68 there, your A-pillar is here. Well, the A-pillar curves around here, so you really can't have a mirror on this part of the door. It's got to be out here for you to be able to utilize it. So that's why these are all, as we get older here, that's why the mirrors are all on the fender. Now, a lot of them didn't have the right-hand mirror. That was not a must back in the day. But in fact, this car probably didn't come with a right-hand mirror when it was built. I probably added that later. When I first was exposed to these cars, I didn't even realize they made a convertible in this body style. But when I saw it in the original brochure, which I guess I saw back in the late 70s, I thought, well, that's pretty cool. If I could ever find one like that, I'd really like to have one. So here it is. This is the 1964 Imperial Crown Coupe, one of around 5,200, made at Jefferson Avenue in Detroit, Michigan. And it's an original survivor car, mostly original paint on it, original vinyl top. The seats were redone. Now this car is silver turquoise, which is a original color for that era. They tried to sell this as sort of the personal luxury model, Typically a Crown series would have a larger rear window. This, they put the smaller rear window that they used in the LeBaron version. So this was marketed sort of as a Thunderbird alternative in the day. Really a lot bigger car than a Thunderbird probably. But the idea was, kind of a personal luxury thing. The seats are, as they described them, aircraft type buckets, and it has the so-called buddy seat in the middle that doesn't move, but each seat is adjustable 4 ways on its own, so kind of gave it a cockpit appearance for the day, I guess you could say. It's just the idea was for me to collect one of each body style of the 64 Imperial.
This is a 1962 Imperial Crown convertible. It's sapphire blue. My dad bought it in 1968 for $500. It was given to me after he passed away about 13 years ago. It was actually brought out of retirement for my son's prom. And well, there was only 554 made. I believe there's about 10 left. I've always been a classic car person. I mean, I was brought up in it, from my parents, and it's just something we've always done.
This is my 1961 Imperial Crown two-door. They made 1,007 of them in 61. This here is an all-original car. I've had it for 4 years. I actually got it in Jackson, so didn't have to go too terribly far for it. So we bought it in 2019, and the first time that we showed it was, I think, in 2020 at the Jackson 4th of July Car Show. And it was the first time that it had been back at that car show since 1995, where it won first place unrestored, and I know it hasn't been touched since then. The paint and interior are all original. We had a stuck intake valve on cylinder 4, so I had to take the heads off and have the cylinder heads redone on that. We had to redo the brakes. But other than that, we really haven't had to do a whole lot. A lot of, touch up, buff in here and clean there. And Dad got those reproduction tires on there. They're BF Goodrich. Well, they say BF Goodrich, but they're made by Coker. So they're the original bias ply tires that would have been on the car, just to make it look like they were back when it was new, with a 2.5-inch white wall, which really makes it look a lot better than just your regular, skinny white wall or just regular radial tires. Probably when my dad, he's had the 75 since 1985. And I've always remembered that car even back when I was a kid. He had bought the 66 in 1999, back before cell phones and all that stuff, saw it in a magazine or whatever, I guess, and did not tell my mom. Flew down to Amarillo, Texas, bought the car, and drove it all the way back before cell phones and all that stuff in a 40-year-old car. But the really interesting part about that is that it came from, because we have the original window sticker for that dark blue car, it came from Collins Brothers Motors in Amarillo, Texas. And this car here came from Collins Brothers Motors in Amarillo, Texas. So they were sold 5 years apart, 61 and 66, at the same dealership when they were bought brand new. This car here ended up in Jackson in the 80s. And then obviously now it's in Cape, now that I've had it since 2019. But it's crazy for those cars 20 years apart, 1999 and 2019, to end up both in Cape. It's got the tallest fins out of any of them. It's got the flight sweep deck lid, which is the fake spare tire Continental kit. It's just decorative, but that was an option back then, and that's a specific trim to 61 only, and it was an optional trunk lid. They're very rare. The taillights, the whole just back end, the look of the car makes it really special. And just the fact that it's original with the original interior. I mean, all my power windows work, the power vent windows work, the power antenna works, the power seat works, and I haven't had to fix none of that stuff. It's just a survivor car. The 61 is taller and it's more pointed at the end. And then 62 and 63 both, just like that blue car over there, they cut the fin down a lot because the fins really started to die in the late 50s. They were kind of going out of style, and it's really rare. A lot of people, when they guess this particular car here, they'll say, oh, was that a 57, a 58, 59? I'm like, well, it's a 61. They're like, wow, 61. And it's because, they really quit making the fins, the people who are old enough to remember those cars. There's like that shark fin trim in the back, and it's got the gold plate behind it. Like, they really didn't have to do the gold plate behind it, or like even on the fender here, it says Imperial in chrome, but there's a 24 karat gold plate behind there that they did just because it's this was the top of the line car, back in the day. These were, $7 grand, where you could buy a fully nice Corvette with a 427 for, half of that. We go to an Imperial only car show, usually Memorial Day weekend, down in Chattanooga. And he decided that he's going to do his meet just in October, so we're like, well, let's have one more centrally located in the U.S., and St. Louis happens to work out great for us because we're only 2 hours away. So I guess they're going to try to start to have this one every Memorial Day. But yeah, we go to his in October, usually, where that's Imperial only. And he's got a ton of cars that brings a ton of people. We've seen people for that show come from Canada before, which is a long way. I mean, to have to cross the border, it's a long way to bring a car for a show, but he brings a lot of people, and hopefully we're going to be able to get this show up where there's, people realize, well, there's a lot of, rare cars here, and, bring their cars out just because it's something special.
Today we've got a 1960 Imperial LeBaron. It's an all-original Survivor 27,000 miles car. My dad actually got the car from the original owners in 1983. I'm now the caretaker of it. The car was parked in 1999 until 2021, when I brought it to my house and brought her back to life. It's actually called Regent Ruby. There was 999 LeBarons made in 1960. The original owner of his name was Tony Carlo. He was a contractor here in St. Louis. My dad was their landscaper, and he started mowing their lawns in '64. But Tony died in '66 and left his wife the car. She would pay my dad once a month to pull the car out, wash it, let it run, and then put it away. And of course he fell in love with it because look at it. He tried to buy it 6 or 7 times. She said, no, I'll never sell that car. Well, she passed away in 1983, and my dad went to the funeral services, and a man sat down next to him in the funeral home and said, aren't you Robert, the man that used to take care of her lawn? And he said, well, yeah. He goes, well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm Mrs. Roberts' lawyer, and I'm handling her estate. And did you know that she left you a car in her will? So this is how it got into the family in '83, and it's only been sold once right here in Clayton, Missouri, and it lived its whole life in town and country. The uniqueness of it is probably the option of the swivel front seats, so you can swivel them out to get out, so your lady didn't have to hike her skirt. And then it's also got front and rear air conditioning set up in it. The pod headlights on the 61 through 63 were definitely a love it or hate it looking front end. But I think for 60 they just made the happiest looking front end on a car. At night there are no light bulbs behind the gauges. It's all electroluminescent paint, so it glows the most beautiful bluish green at night. They just electrify the paint, and it's hard to drive it at night because all you want to do is stare at the gauges and not watch the road.